What's going on, everybody? We're so excited to be back with a brand new podcast as we kick off this fall. We're talking about financial planning for pastors, and Pastor Jim had a great conversation with Noah Brown from Clergy Advantage. Noah is a wealth manager partner there at Clergy Advantage. And if you don't know Clergy Advantage, they're one of our partners. And the passion of Clergy is to provide financial services and education specific to ministers designed to enhance their total financial well-being and ministry success. And Noah talks a lot about why they do that, how they do that, and how they can be a blessing and a benefit to you. So I'd encourage you have something to take some notes as you go through this. And I want to thank our partner, Clergy Advantage. If you have any questions for them, if you want to have a conversation or interested in how they could help you, I'd encourage you to give them a call. Check them out at clergyplanninggroup.com and let them know you're with Significant Church. And I believe they can really be a blessing to you. Due to schedules, this conversation was recorded the other day, and you'll notice that Noah froze up a few times. We had a little bit of issues with his connection, but the audio is good. It's not on your end, so don't refresh. But you're going to get a lot out of this conversation. I really believe it. So let's dive in together. Thank you for being with us today.
Hey, everybody. I hope all's going well in your part of the world. And man, I'm looking forward to our podcast this year. I think that there's some great podcasts that are scheduled. I know they're going to be helpful to all of us, but when I think back to when I was a young pastor, I really believe some of them are going to significantly enhance and even alter the trajectory of certain things about our ministries and honestly add to our quality of life and our peace of mind. Today's kind of a quality of life, peace of mind one. We're going to be talking about stewarding our personal financial future as a pastor. And I've been at it long enough to see there's a lot of guys who care a lot about God's family. They make a lot of sacrifices for God's family. And we applaud that. We're grateful for that. It takes that to build the kingdom. But thank God there are people who want to take care of you too. And today I have Noah Brown with me from Clergy Advantage. Welcome, Noah. How you doing?
Yeah, good, Jim. Good. Yeah. Like I was telling you, I'm technically here on paternity leave. So I hope I sound smart and sharp, but I'm running on little sleep here. So I hope it goes
You
well
seem
and,
like a
and it's
sharp
good.
guy. And,
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
I told you earlier, you kind of did what our daughter did. She had 3 kids in less than 3 years. And that's quite a feat. So I
Yeah,
think my
man.
house is a little quieter than your house at night. And
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
But it's the good kind of crazy, Jim. It's the God honoring kind of crazy, which is all you're asking for.
there you go. Well, one year I was a college baseball player and my son had, uh, we played Little League All-Stars in 4 zones.
Mm,
This one kid pulled together the best players from 4 zones, and he's telling me, he's in my church.
yeah.
He says, Pastor, we want to go play the big boys in Houston and Austin. And I said, that's great, man. That's great. He said,
Yeah.
Pastor, we want you to coach us. And I thought, oh, so
Oh,
literally
here we go.
I would leave the office on Friday, coach baseball
Oh,
and Saturday, take my notes with me, and then we
yeah.
qualify for the AAU national tournament. So,
No way.
yeah, we
That's
had to go Sunday
amazing.
night to do that. But I only say that to tell you it's worth
No
it. The
way.
memories you create,
Yeah.
man, it's all
Yeah.
worth it.
Come
So,
on. That's
uh,
amazing. That's
well,
amazing.
no, we're getting to know you guys. And first of all, let me just say how much we appreciate you investing in pastors. I don't know if you
Mm,
know this, but none of us are compensated. So I take 4 hours
mm.
of my week, and my heart's just to serve pastors. And then I've got an
Come
army
on.
of guys around me who are living with the same heart that we just
Yeah.
want to see pastors flourish. We want to see their families flourish. We want to see their teams
Yeah.
flourish. We want to see them finish strong. We want them not
So good.
just to see their dreams fulfilled. We hope they'll exceed their dreams, like Ephesians
So
3:20
good.
talks about. So
Come
it
on.
blesses me that you guys are a part of sponsoring things and helping us do that because again,
Yeah.
nobody's compensated. You're just kind of joining this army of
Yeah.
people who care about pastors. Uh,
Totally.
but I think a good starting point today is just for you to tell me why. Why do you guys do
Mm,
what you do? And then we can
come
start
on.
talking about the what.
Yeah. No, that's good. And yeah, we're honored to be partnering with you. I think there's two separate whys, right? There's the personal why, like why I do it, and then there's the clergy advantage why. And I think I'll go through both just so that you kind of have a good grasp of what that looks like. On the personal side, I grew up in a ministry family. My dad was a youth pastor. My mom worked in adoption ministry, and so I had that heart, man. I was spending every day of the week at the church. I understood the back end of it and really had a heart for the church from a really young age. But when I was in middle school, high school, my parents got caught up in a Ponzi scheme, man, lost everything, right? They didn't have much to begin with
Wow.
because they were a ministry family. My dad served faithfully for the youth. And as we know, that's typically not the most lucrative position at the church, but he served faithfully, man, and was diligent, was a good steward. And then at some point, the blinders came on, and he made a bad decision when it came to the finances. Lost everything, man, in this Ponzi scheme. And so from that point, I was like, I'll make sure that that never happens to me and my family. And through all of that, there was some hurt and some church issues and just lots of mess that comes with the finance world. And so I pushed that away and said, I'm going to go into finance. I'm going to go make $1 billion and it's going to be amazing. And the Lord just pulled me back in college and after I graduated to say, hey, like I still got my eye on you. Let's take all of your passion for finance and serving people and let's go serve ministers together. And so I've been serving in this role since 2018. And back in 2023 became partner, so part owner of the firm, and have loved every single step along the way, and just seeing God's provision is amazing. I'm sure there are hundreds of stories just like mine of where God said, "Hey, let's use something hard to make some good," which is God's way. It's beautiful. From a clergy advantage perspective, it carries kind of the same tone. Clergy Advantage was started in the 70s to serve the underserved, right? We really started to serve the independent, non-denominational small church, right? People that did not have the giant denomination behind them to come and give them the resources that they needed. And so Clergy Advantage started in the 70s as a tax firm. And along the way, got some really good data, some really good info, some high profile clients. And then I don't know if you remember this, Pastor Jim, but in the late 90s, there was a court case involving Rick Warren where he had his housing allowance challenged. And so
Uh,
out of that, that whole congressional hearing, out of some of the tax strategies that the IRS was trying to implement, we realized, because we were the ones defending Pastor Rick Warren, that the church in general was being underserved in a whole financial holistic picture, right? Just to say, hey, not only are people not understanding ministerial taxes, but they're not understanding ministerial retirement benefits or ministerial investing. And so out of that sort of formed the financial planning and the retirement planning arm of Clergy Advantage. And obviously that's who I work with now. But really our heart at our core is to serve people in underserved places, right? People that may not have access to the right resources, may not have access to people that necessarily feel like they care because they're not making a bunch of money. And so that's our heart, is just to come alongside them, serve them effectively, educate, and then provide the best products available.
yeah. Well, you worked in the financial industry before you came into, is that right? Before you came to Clergy Advantage?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I when I graduated, uh, I started working for the ultra high net worth. I said, I'm going to go into that world because that makes the most sense, right? When you're going to go be a financial advisor, you're like, let me serve the people with the most money. And it was great. I had a great time, but it was really making rich people richer. And that's where God got a hold of my heart and said, "Hey, like let's use these things that you learn. Let's use your passion and start to serve the ministry professional." So it was a great experience, but man, do I love this. It's so great.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I don't think there's anybody who would argue that even denominational or non-denominational pastors, uh, that they've been underserved. I think that's a great
Hmm.
word that you use, that they've just been underserved. And honestly,
Hmm.
when that happens, if we're not careful, young guys don't want to go into ministry.
That's right.
We for sure that we don't want to be, we're not greedy people. You know what I mean? We understand that
No.
we're serving a king and that came from heaven to serve us. And we want to serve people and see churches planted all over the world. But by the same token, you know, pastors should be honored, Paul said. So I'm grateful for what you guys
Yeah.
do.
Come on.
Here, I've got about 5 or 6 questions I think that'll help
Yeah.
guys really really see how this might benefit them. Number one, how does your firm uniquely meet the needs you talked about? And I think there's three things you do. Tell me if I'm wrong. But first
Yeah.
of all, you help them understand unique tax advantages that belong to ministers that sometimes ministers don't know about. The second thing you do is you help them plan for their financial future, which again, there's some opportunities
Yeah.
that ministers may not understand. And then there's also just a logistical side of your
Of
financial.
course.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
you guys do life and disability as well.
Yeah.
You help with that.
We
So those are three basic things.
yeah. Yeah. And I think really at our core, we see ourselves as a ministry, and our ministry is education, right? Our ministry is to educate the pastor in this very unique and complex space of ministerial taxes and ministerial benefits, and to do so with authority, but also with simplicity. And that manifests itself in those three areas, right? So, not to give a sales pitch by any stretch of the imagination, but going through the process of becoming a financial advisor on the front end, even serving the ultra high net worth in tremendous capacity, I didn't know anything about this world. I did not know anything about housing allowance, the social security piece, these really unique types of retirement plans that ministers get, the unique types of disability. But like, no one ever talks about that because this is an underserved market. And it's actually interesting. My transition was not as seamless as I made it seem. I actually quit to become a church planter to say, I'm going to go into ministry. I'm just going to serve. So I quit. And it wasn't until I quit to see how my own finances were going to be different until I learned about this. Right. So it wasn't in my involvement with the financial space that I learned about these things. It was actually becoming a pastor myself and trying to learn about these things that I got connected with this firm. And so really what we try to do, like I said, is bring education with simplicity and with authority, and that manifests itself in those three areas, right? So taxes, right? Really helping ministers understand their super unique tax benefits. Two, in product and plan, right? That there's products and plans that pastors need that the people down the street that have a financial advisor on their front door just don't know, not because they have bad intentions, just because no one's ever taught them. And that manifests itself logistically through offering those products and offering those services.
Yeah. So, do you want to just hit on what some of the unique advantages are to pastors
Yeah,
in the tax front
yeah,
and the retirement front?
absolutely, absolutely. And so I think we'll start just with a high level flyover of what ministerial tax may look like and what's different from just a traditional employee, right? So when you become a pastor in the eyes of the IRS, you have to do so by becoming licensed, commissioned, or ordained. Okay, any three of those are totally fine, but when you become licensed, commissioned, or ordained, is when you technically become a pastor in the eyes of the IRS, right? Your church can see as a pastor, that's great, but until you have those three designations, you're not technically a pastor in the eyes of the IRS. When you become a pastor in the eyes of the IRS, you have four very distinct tax rules. Okay. The first one is that you are considered duly employed. Okay, duly employed is sort of a simple term for something a touch more complex. It means in the eyes of the IRS, you are self employed. All right. But in the eyes of the church, you can be a traditional W-2 employee, right? You can be offered benefits, health insurance, retirement, whatever that looks like. And so you're duly employed. Okay. Number two is that because of your dual employment status, you now have what's called a SECA liability or Social Security tax. You're taxed as a self employed individual, right? So if you're a traditional employee, you're not a pastor, you pay 7.65% to Social Security. And then the other 7.65% is paid by your employer, church, hospital, school, whatever. Okay. Now, when you become a pastor, that full 15.3% gets put on you as an individual. The church can withhold if they want to. That's number three, is no mandatory withholding. They can if they want to, but they're not obligated to. So if there are any issues ever with your taxes because you are considered self-employed in the eyes of the IRS, it is on you. The onus falls on the individual pastor, which sounds weighty and hard, right? An individual pastor dealing with the IRS can sound a little overwhelming, but that's why you have to have people in your corner that can tell you the right stuff and then go to bat for you. Number three, like I mentioned, is going to be that status of the SICA, but the withholding it being not mandatory. It gets kind of complex and convoluted. Churches have whole different ways that they can set it up and do it, but we are here to kind of help guide and walk a church through what that actually looks like from a withholding standpoint. Like I said, the church is not required to withhold stuff for an individual pastor, but can if they want to. Before moving on to number four, I did also just want to touch on that Social Security piece. One of the biggest misconceptions and misunderstandings that we see pastors fall into is this idea of opting in or out of Social Security, right? That can be a massive decision. One, that we can obviously help walk you through, but two, that you have to be well informed on. I'll start by saying this, the Social Security decision must be a religious decision. Obviously, it has financial impacts, but it must be a religious decision on the front end. So a pastor, when they become licensed, commissioned, ordained, has 2 years to decide whether or not they want to stay in the Social Security system for their ministry income only. Okay. So let's look at both sides. Let's say you say, I want to be in the Social Security system. Everything that we just said reigns true, essentially. You're going to have to pay that 15.3%, but you are still paying into Social Security. You're still accruing credits and quarters. You're still going to be eligible for Medicare on the back end at 65. But the flip side is if you say, I want to opt out, okay, that's called Form 4361, where you get to opt out of paying that Social Security tax. That 15.3% goes down to 0%. So you're not paying that tax anymore, but you're not paying into the Social Security system anymore. Okay, that does not mean that you lose any of your already accrued benefits. So if you've already accrued all of your quarters and credits for Social Security and Medicare, those stay. You're just not paying into it anymore. Okay, so that can be sort of a convoluted thing that requires a lot of systems and planning, but one that probably a youth pastor is making when they're 23, 24, because the senior pastor has a decision on that and they feel convicted, but they don't know how to operate it. And so it can be a tricky thing that requires lots of planning. And regardless of the decision that the pastor makes, there are really cool, really effective things that we can do to help somebody plan for their future. Does that make sense? Any questions on that?
No, it makes a lot of sense. I think for a lot of youth pastors, what's sad is you have 2 years, and sometimes the
Right.
ordaining organization may or may not even told them,
Yeah.
or made them
Oh,
help them
totally.
understand it. How
Totally.
about when you say a church can withhold or not withhold, does a church have to file a form to have the opportunity not to withhold? Or can
It happens automatically for the pastoral staff. So the pastoral staff only, that's why there's the dual employment status. So for the pastoral staff, a church doesn't necessarily need to file or fill out any forms because that person is now considered self-employed in the eyes of the IRS. And so the withholding now becomes, or the paying of the taxes becomes the onus of the individual.
Yeah, that's good. Let me ask you this. I want to kind of shift to retirement if that's okay.
Yeah.
Because a lot of guys, and honestly, it's not even just, I know you know this, it's not even just pastors who are underserved, but people are
Right.
underserved. Their
Mhm.
parents often don't teach them good financial basics. So, have you ever heard of money milestones? Have you ever heard of that?
I ha-
Yeah.
I haven't. I haven't. Yeah, tell me a little more about
Yeah,
that.
so we have it in our church. It just gives you 8 steps to where you can live generously. So,
Love
the
it.
first thing is, paying off your debt. And I'll go ahead and ask our graphics team to put all 8 of them up on the screen for people who are watching. But as you're looking at them, I'll just talk to you that you can notice early is to invest. A lot of people think they got to pay off debt and try to find
Mm,
money to invest.
mm,
But the truth is, it's better to invest early because of the
mm.
magic of compound interest.
Come
And
on. Yeah.
it's one of those things you got to begin with the in mind. And people don't believe this when you say it. I always have to illustrate it. but it's not really all about how much money you make. It's how you steward
Come
it,
on.
how you
That's
invest
right.
it, that can have you come to a point of financial freedom. I've been pastoring the same church 37, I'm starting the 37th year, so 36 years right now. And my wife and I, we've just lived simply,
Mm,
but we wouldn't have to work now just because we've lived simply and we've followed
yeah.
some basics. So I just want to encourage every pastor who hears me when I say this could be life altering to you. Uh,
Mm,
man, I like to tell people, see every 10 years of your life like a chip you're going to play,
mm,
and play that chip wisely not even
mm,
just in terms of financial, but your kids are going to go from 0 to 10 quicker than what you think. They're going to go from 10 to
mm,
20 quicker than what you think. Your grandkids are going to go from 0 to 10 quicker than what you think. And then one day, we're just a little cog in the big wheel of the kingdom of God. And the kingdom of
come on.
God's so important. I want to play my little cog part really, really well. But I like the illustration where if you think you're real important, just stick your hand in a bucket of water and take it out. And that's kind of what your life's like. You make a ripple
Mm,
while you're there, but when you're gone, somebody's going to replace you and they're going to do the
mm,
job. So don't get, that's why I like the webinar. Don't get lost doing ministry.
come on.
Iron sharpen iron. And I just gave you a challenge this year. Watch it every 2 weeks and see if some parts of your life aren't enhanced where you go, man, that was worth it. And to me, this is one of those shows today that if you don't follow money milestones, you're gonna play chips and then you're gonna look back and you're gonna wish that you did.
Mm,
So do you guys do that kind of financial management? Do you help
yeah.
them with a plan or do you just put them onto products?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. I think, and it's all going to tie back into this question. But the fourth ministerial tax benefit is housing allowance,
Ah, yeah.
right? The housing allowance piece, man, like that can be
Yeah.
such a powerful tool. And so when it comes to financial planning or products, everything that we do is centered around how to take advantage of these benefits. That's why it's called Clergy Advantage, right? And so that housing allowance piece, one, understanding, right? Helping to educate every pastor that comes in our door to say, hey, here's how you should be doing housing allowance, right? There's a lot of misconceptions around how you should effectively do it, fair market rental value, what's claimable, what's not, right? And so we simplify that down to say, here's what you can claim, here's what you do, here's how you move forward, here's how you take the next step, right? So it's relying on these ministerial benefits to actually make a difference in a pastor's life. And so that's on the financial planning side, right? Taking their benefits and helping them take the next step. But on the product side, right? You mentioned the retirement thing. You mentioned being a good steward, right? All of that is unbelievably important, but it's also about using the right tools, right? You got to have the right tools in place to utilize. And so if you're a pastor and you are not putting money into a retirement place that is going to give you tax-free contributions, tax-free growth, and tax-free distribution as housing allowance when you are no longer in ministry, you're putting your funds in the wrong spot. I'll say again, tax-free in, tax-free growth, and then tax-free distributions as housing allowance when you are no longer in ministry. Okay. If you are putting your money as a pastor into any other spot, you are making the wrong choice, right? Because you, as a pastor, have such unique benefits, you may as well take advantage of them. This is called a denominational 403b9 or a 403b9, something that Clergy Advantage offers. There's a bunch of other great companies out there that offer this type of plan, but you have to have this type of plan in order to get it right so that you can get all of these benefits. And so not only do we help walk somebody through, hey, here's how much you should be saving, we make sure that they're getting into the right place with the right plan, and then helping them to take those distributions effectively, helping them to make sure that they're wise and generous, and discerning on the back end when those distributions and quote unquote retirement happens.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. When a pastor
Yeah.
uses his housing allowance, let's just say it's a 30-year note on his house, and then
Yeah.
that house is paid off, is he done using it at that point outside of utilities and that, or or is
Yeah.
the only way to keep utilizing it to sell your house and buy another one? What?
It's a great question. And it's one that we get all the time. So we have really unique tax strategies that we can utilize to help somebody with a paid off home. But I'll say this. Even if you have a paid off home, you're still going to have utilities, right? You're still going to have taxes. You're still going to have insurance. You're still going to have your monthly bills. But more than 70% of individuals move at some point in their retirement years, right? That's a lot of people. And that's likely going to be the case for most in the ministerial spot, right? Whether it's downsizing, whether it's moving to be closer to grandkids, whether it's buying a second home, doesn't really matter what it is, right? You're probably going to move in your retirement years, and you may as well have tax-free dollars in your retirement account instead of the equity in your home that's already tax-free to put down toward another home, right? So really cool strategies that we can implement on that side. It can also be used tax-free for long-term care, right? So if you ever go into a long-term care facility, the funds can come out to you tax-free as housing allowance for long-term care. Now, you don't have to use the funds on housing, right? If you set up a 403B the right way and you take normal distributions to pay for gas, groceries, or trips, it's just going to be taxable to you like any other retirement account would be, right? So you're not losing anything by utilizing this. It just gives you a touch more advantage than just a traditional retirement plan would.
Yeah. Could a guy take a home equity loan out on that and continue?
It depends on what you spend the home equity line on, right? It has to be something
Oh, no.
involving your
So it's something
primary
they should talk to
residence.
you
Yeah,
individually about probably. I
exactly
get
right.
people asking
Exactly
me.
right.
That's why my advice is, hey,
Oh
I'm a
no, it's a
pastor.
great question.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's also part of the reason why we typically, now this is not a broad range, but we typically don't encourage pastors to make additional principal payments on their home, right? If you're doing that instead of saving, it's probably not helping you much, right? Like
Oh, for
you
sure.
as a minister have to do things so differently than what Dave Ramsey would tell you to do because he's not talking to ministers, right? So there's some really cool principles that ministers need to follow that the rest of the world just doesn't.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, let's just talk about people are at different cycles. So let me just take a pastor in his 20s. Let's take one in his 30s. Let's take one in his 40s.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get retirement where it needs to be.
Come
How
on.
much of their income should they be putting aside just to make sure that when they get to 70, let's say they work
Yeah.
to the late 60s or 70s, they're going to be okay?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. And it hinges on whether or not you quote unquote opted out of Social Security, right? That does make a difference. And so that's the starting place typically. If you've opted out of Social Security, regardless of your age, that 15.3% that you're saving on tax is not a raise. It's not a raise. Though it can feel like that, it's not. It's you saying I'm going to be a better steward of my money than the US government by putting it into a retirement account. So if you've opted out of Social Security, that 15% has to be the starting place. If you don't do that, you will be behind. That is the number one mistake that we see pastors make in retirement is they've opted out when they're in their 20s and 30s. They didn't know what they were doing. They used that 15% as a raise, and now they're in their 50s and 60s. They can't retire, or they have to put their entire paycheck into a retirement account to try to catch up. They're staying at the church longer than they should. They're not allowing for effective legacy planning and planning when it comes to distribution of retirement. They're stuck, and we don't want you to be stuck ever, right? So that's those who have opted out of Social Security. That 15% is the goal. You gotta try to get there as soon as you possibly can, right? For everybody else, right, that's paying their 15.3% in, that stayed in Social Security, I like following, and this again is generic, right? I like following the 80-10-10 plan, right? 10% is your first fruits, man. That's given, right? That's your generosity. 10% is saved, and 80% is lived on, right? Now that 10% saved is likely going to be retirement unless you don't have an emergency account, right? Like if you got $50 in your checking and savings account, probably not wise to put 10% of your income in retirement. Maybe split it up a little bit, but that's the goal, right? The 80-10-10 plan. But you can't stop there. And we know that how important generosity is. And so our goal is to help our clients say, hey, how do we live on less and give more? Right? Like that's got to
Yeah.
be part of it. How do we live on less and give more? Keeping in lockstep with the saving at 10%, but how does our generosity increase, right? Is it 1% a year? Is it 2% a year? Is it 10% a year? How is your generosity increasing? And let's create a plan around that. So really, if you're looking to start 20s, 30s, and 40s, you're kind of in the same realm where you're trying to figure life out. You may have kids, you may have family, you may have your first mortgage or your second mortgage, and you're just trying to figure it out. Just set an attainable goal and try to get there. That's why the 80-10-10 plan typically works so well. Right now, when you're in your 40s, 50s, and early 60s, the one thing I would say is if you've been a diligent planner and saver, right? Let's say it's ebbed and flowed along the way, but you've been consistent. It can feel a little discouraging with where you're at. And I know because of my personal story, that's how old my parents were when they said, I'm going to try to get rich quick because I don't feel like this is multiplying the way that I need it to be able to retire. Compound interest happens way quicker in your 60s, okay, because you have more money to compound. So if you're in your 40s and 50s and you feel like you've been saving diligently, you are not seeing it compound the way that you want it to, you feel stuck, you feel behind, just one, ask questions, ask for help. And two, I would encourage you to stay encouraged because I don't think you're as far behind as you think you are.
Yeah, that's really good. And, we only have 45 minutes, so we got about 15 minutes to go. And I think you guys can already feel, especially some of you that might be younger watching today, man, there's a lot to this. And I just want to encourage you that there is. We've kept our housing allowance. We're in our second house. We maximized that side of it. And then on the actual retirement side, it's just they're great avenues for you to be able to just be a good financial steward and be in a place where you're not thinking about money all the time. This is something I know we're all facing right now as pastors because I've been at it for 36 years. The giving patterns of different generations are different, and honestly, everything's different. That's why church exists. We disciple one generation. We hope they disciple their kids. Sometimes it happens good. Sometimes it doesn't happen as good in families, and then we just start all over again. We just keep discipling people in God's ways. And I think the two things that pastors are facing today, some of them are facing it with joy because they made good decisions, and others are facing it with some angst because they wish they could go back and remake some decisions.
Mm,
One is deferred facility maintenance. So let me just
mm,
encourage you, that's not what this show's about, but to make sure from a facility perspective that, you know what, we're not going to come to the point where we got this huge facility need down the road that we weren't ready to take on. But your retirement's really the same way, right? That when you come down the road, you need to make sure you can take care of yourself. As our body gets older and as we come into different seasons, I know a lot of us are preach till I die people. I'm that way myself, but I just decided that I wanted to be working in my 60s and 70s because I want to, not because I have to. Also
mm,
made the decision I didn't want to be a burden on the church at that point. I knew they'd have to be
mm,
paying younger guys. So I'm so glad that we're starting this year thinking about these things because I know we're thinking about launching our kids programs and launching our youth programs. But trust me, if you talk to your spouse tonight about this, they're going to be really, really glad that you talk to them about it. And we won't go into all of the products because you can call Clergy Advantage for yourself. But I hope you're hearing that there's a whole lot that's to it. Even life insurance,
mhm.
I think the saying in life insurance is you can create an estate with the stroke of a pen, right? So I did that in my
Come
20s.
on.
I created an estate with the
Yeah.
stroke of a pen, term life
Yep.
insurance. I don't have it anymore,
Yeah.
It's a good investment. It was
Mhm.
insurance. That's what it was.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
guys help with that too, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's different insurance needs for pastors. From a life insurance side and a disability insurance side. From a life insurance side, you named it, Jim, right? Like we want to see especially younger pastors, take advantage of how inexpensive term life insurance can be, right? Like $13 a month to cover all of your needs if something happens for you. And the goal is that you never use it. You let that thing lapse when you're 50 and 60, and now you've done a good job saving and you're off and running, right? Like that's the goal of term life insurance and life insurance in general, right? Like it should be insurance. Typically, for most pastors, whole life insurance, like variable life insurance, is probably not the best route, right? Those products are typically designed for different people in different life stages than where most pastors find themselves, right? So just see if you can get some term life insurance and do it out for 20 years, 10 years, whatever you feel comfortable till maybe your kids are out of the house. But it's going to be really inexpensive. And it's typically all you're going to need is, 10, 15, $20 a month to cover your basic needs. And then from a church perspective as well, right? Like just think about this. If you're maybe on an elder board, you're an executive pastor, what would happen to the church if your senior pastor passed away, right? We've seen that happen. It's obviously tremendously sad. But what's even more sad is if there was no contingency plan in place, the church kind of starts to waver and fall apart. If you as a church were to receive a big sum of cash, right, to go hire somebody great, or to do some things from a pulpit perspective, or from a maintenance perspective, how much better would the church feel about something horrible happening to the senior pastor, executive pastor, something like that? So be thinking as a church about how you want to cover the key people at your church. And then on the disability side, most disability policies don't cover your housing allowance as income, right? So they'll look at your W-2 and housing allowance shouldn't be showing up on there. So you say, hey, after your housing allowance, you're making $12 a year, right? Like that's what most disability policies are going to cover is your after housing allowance wages. You got to find a policy that's going to cover your full wages and is going to cover your own occupation, right? Most disability policies will say, hey, if you can do any job at the church, then you don't get disability. But we want a policy to put in place where, hey, if you're the senior pastor and something happens to your vocal cords, you could absolutely still do stuff. You could strum a guitar, whatever. But we want to make sure that you're covered for the role that God's called you into. So those are the two things to think about with insurance. Like I said, it's just insurance, right? Don't overthink it. Get a little bit to make sure your needs are covered should something happen. And if these things lapse, that's actually best case scenario.
Yeah, that's good. Well, let's close with this. I, can you just help me, especially with a young pastor? What advice would you give them? They're just young, they're starting out. If you were to just tell them two or three things, what would you tell them?
Yeah, the finance is marathon, not a sprint. This is a marathon, and there are going to be ebbs and flows, right? If you follow the latest TikTok trend or the latest cryptocurrency, it probably doesn't go all that well for you. Now you may be the one in a million that makes a bunch of money on cryptocurrency. Like you may
Just take a little
that.
bit if you're going to try that, right? Just take a
Just
little.
do a little
If
bit.
you hit it, you
And
win anyway, right?
That's exactly right. Like do it. That's great. But don't only do that, right? Like don't only do that because you want to buy the Maserati that you see on TikTok. Like that's not helpful. What is helpful is seeing this as a marathon, and that slow little steps get you to where you want to be, right? Like we are very much a people of instant gratification. That is not finance. And if you look at finance like it's instant gratification, you will always be disappointed by your finances, right? So I'd say take slow, little, small steps and just start, whatever that looks like, whatever the next step is for you, whether it's just learning more, whether it's asking the right questions, or it's $5 a month, whatever it is, you gotta just start. And number two, I would say you start probably with generosity, right? As important as saving is, right? And as important as stewardship is from an investing standpoint, stewardship into God's kingdom is more important, right? So if you're building a budget, the first line item on your budget should be giving, right? Doesn't matter what it is, right? As long as it's kingdom based and as long as you feel good about where the Spirit's leading in you, that's what you need, right? You start with generosity and then you take slow, little, small steps to get where you need to be.
Yeah, that's so good. You know, we all have our own story, and my story was when I was 25, both of my parents passed away. And
Mm,
so I went to college. I was a missionary 3 years. I was starting as the mission director of the university I attended, and I got a call that my dad had a heart attack and he was gone. And then my mom got cancer, and before the year was over, they were both gone. It was a crazy year for me. But that put me
mm,
in a position where I had to figure some things out because I couldn't call my parents. You know, I had
mm,
siblings that could help because I was the youngest of five, but still they're busy. And so it caused me to be an avid reader. I remember getting the Price
mm,
Waterhouse thick book like this and said, okay, my parents taught me the 10-80-10 principle, but
mhm,
I'm not real wise about how to invest the 10. So I just
mm,
started
mm,
reading and started studying. And I just want to encourage a pastor to take time for that. So often we're
mm,
taking time for so many things. But I think Solomon said it, you know, I've taken care of the vineyards of others, but I haven't
mm,
taken care of my own vineyard. So I just want to say, starting in 2 weeks, what we're going to do this year is I'm going to lead some webinars with some really great guests. And here's what we're going to talk about for about 3 or 4 weeks. I haven't decided yet. We're going to talk on 3 or 4 of our webinars about developing the relationships you need to succeed. How
mm,
do I do that in life? How do I target areas that I really want God to bless? And how do I take the principles of mentoring and the principles of finding the right teachers and getting the right information, because even sometimes we have to get it for people who are our own style,
mm.
right? What works for one person may not work for another person. So I'm just really looking forward to our webinars this year. And as you guys all know, nobody gets paid to do this. We do this because God cares about you. And we do it because God has spoken to us to not just pastor our church, but to pastor the pastors who are laying down their life for the church. And man, we're so grateful for what you do. We're so grateful for how you love God's people and love God's kingdom and love missionaries and love all the things that you love. So let's make it a great year together, and let's remember iron sharpens iron. I went to the office lots of days feeling like I wasn't so sharp, and I had to figure something out. And but when we have good fellowship together, that's enjoyable, we leave sharper too. So let's do that together. Noah, they can talk to you more at clergysupport.com. Is that the best way for them to get a hold
Yep.
of you?
Clergysupport.com, clergyadvantage.com. You give it a Google. All of the offerings, all of the information's on there. And what I'll say in closing is on that website, we have now probably 2 dozen free videos on the things that we talked about from a
Mm.
tax and financial planning side today, right? It's all free. I recommend watching a video. It's called Tax Free Money for Ministers. Man, it goes through Social Security, goes through housing allowance, it goes through how to save as a minister for retirement from the most tax advantaged way possible. So all of that is free. I recommend that you guys watch that. If you have questions, you call us. We're here, like I said, as a ministry to be educators around this, and share it. If you know people in your community that are struggling on this side, that have questions about this side, share those videos. Those are there as a free resource for you so that you can have a weapon to go against all of this craziness that we call taxes and financial planning. And we just want to make it simple and give it to you with authority.
Yeah, I guess that explains why we couldn't get too deep into some of these subjects. How many videos did you say you have on your website again? Did you
Yeah, about 2 dozen. There's
about
I
two
think
dozen?
there's
That's a
about two
lot of
dozen
it.
on there.
So you guys,
Yeah,
that's a
man.
lot of video watching. Maybe you can ask your wife to help you. I don't know, or whatever.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
uh,
start with the one. Start with
yeah.
tax-free money for ministers. You'll be in a good spot.
Yeah, but you have to, yeah, you have to get this information. And if not, you're going to
Come on.
regret it. Honestly, if you hear
Yep.
what was available to you, what you didn't take advantage of, you'll definitely regret it. So thank you for being with us today. And Noah, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you for
You
all
got
you
it,
do
brother.
out of your, because your heart for pastors. And thank you for caring about what we do at Significant Church. We're really grateful for that. And have fun with those
Yeah.
babies.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate you, brother. Have a good rest of your day. We'll chat
Okay.
with you later.
Been great talking to you. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
you too. Bye.